Hi, my name is Tyler Nguyen, and today I'm going to talk about violence, video games, and ethics. This is for FIU CGS 3095 in the fall semester 2020. Video games have always been under the scrutiny of the media by the older generations, though it is technically an intergenerational phenomenon, but that's something we'll look at moving forward. Some reasons for the scrutiny are that video games can offer a great deal of graphic content, all the while being notably more interactive than other entertainment mediums. Juvenoia is a term coined by the New Hampshire sociologist David Finkelor, which describes intergenerational inability to understand the generation that comes after it. The term juvenoia means fear of the young, and this comes down to the fear of the unknown. The people who are the parents and the grandparents of today strive to provide the best life they can to their children. By looking back at their own lives, they aim to teach the new generation what they know and how to go about life successfully. Unfortunately, the world changes and technology advances, and the back in my day trope comes into fruition. Unlike the rest of the technology from the Cold War days, video games have since advanced, and despite their long-standing history, they can still be unfamiliar to those who have followed it since its inception. On the right, there's a quote from the author George Orwell that describes juvenoia best. Every generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it, and wiser than the one that comes after it. Juvenoia is a very real thing, and we can see in these examples. Author William Smith wrote about the integration of cheap newspapers and, quote, superior means of locomotion in his 1884 book, Morley, Ancient and Modern. He says, men now live, think, and work at express speeds, leaving them no time to talk with a friend who may share the compartment with them. He feared that society would degrade socially. The Medical Brief, in their 1898 publication, talked about the dangers of sensationalist newspapers. They say, there are some American newspapers whose influence is for evil, and newspapers tend to create perverted taste and develop vicious tendencies. The American Psychological Association wrote in 2003, high levels of violent video game exposure have been linked to delinquency, fighting at school, during free pay periods, and criminal behavior. While these observations are not objectively wrong, they are far too fast in their generalizations, and only individuals who already show traits of what they fear. Asocial and antisocial people will be most identifiable when it comes down to cheap newspaper and superior means of locomotion. People who are more gullible will pick up sensationalist newspapers and click on clickbait advertisements. All who play violent video games are not aggressive and violent, but it may be true that those who are aggressive and violent tend to play violent video games. Additionally, the Royal Society Open Science said about violence in video games in 2019. Thus, current research is unavailable to support the hypothesis that violent video games have a meaningful long-term predictive impact on youth aggression. Video games have a lot of similarities with movies. Both are trying to tell a story, build a world, and create characters that develop into the story. Most importantly, however, they both are trying to immerse you into the world they have built. In the end, they have the same goals and execute them in very similar ways. For the purpose of storytelling, violence is little more than a tool. A powerful tool, but a tool nonetheless. Violence tells us about the character and the world they're in, because it is extraordinarily frowned upon and unacceptable in our society. In his book, The Anatomy of Story, John Truby breaks down the three elements of character: weakness, need, and desire. An example of violence as a tool would be The Mist, which is a film based upon a Stephen King novel. At the end of the story, our protagonist, David, is stuck in a broken down car with his son and other survivors of the world ending event, The Mist, armed with only a pistol. In The Mist, Lovecraftian monsters loom and brutally kill anyone they find, which has led to the deaths of every other character in the story. Being stuck and surrounded by monsters, death seemed inevitable, and this was as obvious to the characters as it was to us. Throughout the film, David had done his best to save everyone he could, though he was never successful in saving anyone other than himself, his son. This is a direct reflection of his character elements. David's weakness is his inability to be a leader and to save other survivors, and it's because of this that he's driven to extreme guilt. It is his need to do what he can to save others from the monsters in the mist, and it is his desire to be the best father that he can be and to save his son. The decision he faces at this point is to let everyone wait in the car and die at the hands of the monsters, or use the pistol he has and to mercy kill everyone else in the car, as there are not enough bullets to kill everyone in the car and himself. He, along with others in the car, go for the latter option. This is a tragedy, no doubt, but it completes David's character development. Though not in the way he would have wanted, he finally gets to save everyone from the monsters, satiating his weakness and his need. And his desire of saving his son from the monsters and preventing the brutal and painful death was fulfilled. In analyzing his character elements, David's choice then seems inevitable and is easier to empathize. Additionally, his choice was not without consequence. Soon after the murder of everyone in the car, rescue arrives, and it is made clear that the other, seemingly less appropriate decision would have led to a more satisfying character story development, and would have saved everyone, not only from the monsters, but in this case, death. David is forced to live on with the consequences of his own choices. In the video game world, there have been equally compelling stories, and the developer Naughty Dog produced what many have called a masterpiece. The Last of Us 2 puts the players in the shoes of a young woman, Ellie, who lives in a small but lively community with her father figure, Joel. Years after the world ended in a zombie apocalypse, Joel and Ellie had been through thick and thin. As the story unfolds, Joel is captured, and just like Ellie, we are forced to watch as his captors kill Joel. This kicks off the story, as Ellie, driven by rage and sadness, goes on an intense journey with her significant other to exact her revenge on Joel's murderers. While in the search of the girl who killed Joel, Abby, Ellie finds herself killing everyone else who was present that night. Finally catching up with Abby, one of Ellie's friends is killed, and Joel's brother, along with her wife, barely escape with their lives and choose to move on.
You mind bringing him back in?
Despite developing her relationship with her significant other, having a child, and settling into a farmhouse on their own, Ellie cannot escape her past and is driven to exact her revenge on Abby. Leaving all she had behind, she once again finds Abby, and this time with a young friend, but they're both beaten and bruised, escaping from the confines of the captors of their own.
He's not a part of this.
In the fight, she recalls her attachment and relationship to Joel, and recognizes that killing Abby will not bring Joel back. She returns home to find that everything she had been lost in the pursuit of senseless revenge. Andrew Webster of The Verge wrote of the game, "It is not just a game about violence. It is one that grapples with the impact of that violence and shows players the consequences." Video games, movies, and almost every form of entertainment is downstream of culture, and whatever content is popular will often reflect the social orthodoxy. When they first came into fruition, video games were simple, both regarding graphics and content. The market was geared towards children, and thus video games were seen as children's playthings. Since then, however, the industry has since grown and pushed the boundaries to include a more mature target audience, and therefore include more adult content. One notable game was, and still is, Mortal Kombat, which was considered to be one of the most violent video games of its time in 1993. Its gruesome fatalities and finishing moves created much controversy and found its way onto the congressional discussion in the US. Debating its regulation or outright censorship, the game industry decided to self-regulate, and the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, known as ESRB, came into fruition. This ratings board provided consumers with the knowledge to make informed decisions as to what to buy and for what age group. This is akin to the movie industry, where in the 1930s they faced similar backlash, so they self-regulated and created their own rating system, which has persisted with some changes to today. Rating systems are everywhere, and even toys have warnings that provide to the consumer an idea of who the toys are meant for. It makes sense then that it would be the responsibility of the consumers to do the research and find the video games that are appropriate for them or for the people they hope to buy for. In conclusion, video games as we know them today are still quite novel and are equally subject to juvenilia by the older generations as anything else. But just like other forms of media, or anything novel for that matter, they will eventually become part of a cultural orthodoxy if they have not already. Many games today, like The Last of Us 2, hope to immerse us in their story and to put us into the shoes of the characters we are playing, and into the world they have built for us. Violence, just like in the real world, can tell us about the environment we're in and about the people who are driven to commit violent acts. Violence in video games is only as unethical as storytelling is. Not all games are story-driven, however, and in their case, violence may not be used as a narrative element, but rather as an artistic choice. The developers of games have the choice to make whatever they want, but at the end of the day, it is up to the consumer to check the rating and to make an informed decision themselves.